In a quiet corner of Sweden, surrounded by endless forests and frozen lakes, stands a workshop unlike any other. Inside, the air hums not with chaos, but with precision, a kind of scientific poetry. Carbon fiber dust glitters in beams of morning light. Tools rest in surgical order. And in the middle of it all, a man stares at what most would call impossible. That man is Christian von Koenigsegg. Today, Koenigsegg is a name that echoes through the hypercar world like a thunderclap, whispered alongside Bugatti, McLaren, and Pagani. But decades ago, it was just a dream. One man's vision to build the fastest, most advanced car the world had ever seen, not from Germany, not from Italy, not from Japan, but from a small Scandinavian town most people couldn't even find on a map. This wasn't born out of wealth or corporate ambition. It was born out of obsession. Christian wasn't just another engineer. He was a dreamer in a country that built safe, sensible cars, Volvos, Saabs, vehicles that symbolized restraint. But in Christian's mind, cars were more than transportation. They were art. They were freedom. They were the ultimate expression of human ingenuity. He was told it couldn't be done, that Sweden didn't have the infrastructure, the money, the culture for supercars, that one man couldn't compete with Ferrari or Lamborghini. And yet, he tried. He sketched designs that defied convention. He built prototypes in borrowed garages. He taught himself the science of aerodynamics, composites, and engine design. He didn't chase trends. He built from pure logic and limitless curiosity. And somewhere between those sleepless nights and the sound of a first engine roaring to life, a legend began. Koenigseg's journey wasn't just about speed. It was about challenging the very limits of what was possible. The first car, the CC prototype, was unveiled in 1996, a mechanical manifesto that declared, "Sweden can dream big too." But behind every triumph came a storm: financial ruin, devastating fires, production disasters, and the kind of setbacks that would have crushed almost anyone else. Yet each time, Christian rebuilt, stronger, smarter, faster. Koenigsegg's story is more than automotive history. It's a parable of resilience, of innovation born from isolation. From the CCR, once the world's fastest car, to the Agera RS, to the mind-bending Jesko and hybrid Regera, every Koenigsegg isn't just a machine. It's a declaration that even from a country of silence and snow, one man's voice can still shake the earth. This is not a story of cars. This is a story of vision, of rebellion, of human will. This is the story of Koenigsegg, the man, the machine, and the pursuit of the impossible. Introduction. Before the world ever heard the roar of a Koenigsegg engine, before carbon fiber became synonymous with speed, before the name Christian von Koenigsegg carried the same weight as Enzo Ferrari or Ferdinand Porsche, there was simply a young boy in Sweden, wide-eyed and full of impossible dreams. Born on July 2, 1972, in Stockholm, Sweden, Christian von Koenigsegg grew up far from the glamour of the automotive capitals of Europe. His family name had noble roots, but his world was one of curiosity, invention, and imagination. Sweden wasn't known for flamboyance or mechanical excess. It was a country of modest design and practical engineering. Volvos and Saabs were the national pride, safe, reliable, unpretentious. But for Christian, safety wasn't the goal. Wonder was. He was the kind of child who took apart toys not to break them, but to understand them. His fascination with how things worked became an obsession that shaped his early years. He would spend hours studying the movements of mechanical parts, tracing every gear, spring, and lever as if they were clues to a greater puzzle. At the age of 5, something happened that would change his life forever. It was a summer morning when his father took him to a local cinema. On the screen flickered an animated film called Flåklypa Grand Prix, a Norwegian stop-motion movie about a bicycle repairman who builds his own race car to compete against the giants. To most children, it was just a story. But for Christian, it was a revelation. The idea that one man, armed with passion, tools, and imagination, could create a machine that could take on the world, it lit a spark that would never go out. From that moment on, Christian knew what he wanted to do with his life. He wanted to build the world's greatest car, not just fast, but revolutionary, a machine that would bend the laws of engineering itself. His parents didn't dismiss it as a childish dream. They saw something unusual in him, a relentless curiosity that refused to fade. His father, Jesko von Koenigsegg, an entrepreneur with a strong business mind, encouraged him to explore his creativity. His mother, Brita, nurtured his imagination. Together, they gave him room to dream. But even with support, Sweden wasn't exactly a breeding ground for supercar innovation. The roads were narrow, the climate was harsh, and the automotive culture prized safety over speed. The odds were impossible. Still, impossibility only fueled him. By his teenage years, Christian became fascinated with machines of all kinds, from small engines to aircraft design. He built go-karts, tuned engines, and spent hours sketching his vision of the perfect car. When other kids played sports, he studied the aerodynamics of Formula One. When his friends talked about careers, he talked about carbon fiber, turbochargers, and downforce. In the mid-1980s, as automotive legends like Ferrari's F40 and Porsche's 959 captured global headlines, Christian saw something else: opportunity. These were incredible machines, but they were bound by convention. He believed there was room for something more daring, a supercar that wasn't just fast, but intellectually engineered to perfection. After finishing school, Christian pursued business studies. It wasn't that he wanted to work in finance. He wanted to understand how to run a company. He was preparing, silently, methodically, for the future he envisioned. At just 22 years old, he decided to take the leap. It was the early 1990s, and Sweden was in an economic recession. Companies were closing, unemployment was high, and industries were shrinking. But while others saw crisis, Christian saw an opening. He believed that when everyone else stopped dreaming, it was the perfect time to start. In 1994, with no factory, no investors, and no automotive experience, he made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would start building a supercar. By himself. He wasn't inspired by luxury. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing the feeling he had as a 5-year-old boy watching that film. That sense of wonder that anything was possible if you were bold enough to try. And so, Koenigsegg Automotive was born. It began not in a high-tech facility, but in a small workshop in Olofström, a quiet Swedish town better known for its steel and manufacturing industries. Christian was joined by a few close friends and engineers who believed in his vision. There were no blueprints for success, no established path, just a dream, a sketch, and a will strong enough to defy logic. Every detail mattered. Christian personally obsessed over the aerodynamics, the layout, the powertrain. He read technical manuals like novels and studied the greatest automotive engineers in history. He dissected the work of Colin Chapman, Gordon Murray, and Ferdinand Porsche, learning from their philosophies while forming his own. But he was also an outsider, a rebel engineer in a world dominated by century-old companies. The automotive establishment didn't take him seriously. "Who is this young Swede trying to build a supercar?" they asked. That doubt became his motivation. Christian's goal wasn't to replicate what others had done. He wanted to redefine it, to create a car so advanced that it would silence every skeptic. A machine where every screw, every surface, and every gram of weight had purpose. As his small team grew, so did the dream. The name Koenigsegg began to spread quietly among enthusiasts and journalists. People were curious. Could this mysterious young Swede really do what Enzo Ferrari and Ferruccio Lamborghini did decades earlier? Could he build a car that would make the world take notice? But Christian wasn't interested in making headlines. Not yet. He was obsessed with getting every detail right. The world's fastest car couldn't just be fast. It had to be perfect. He worked tirelessly, often sleeping in the workshop, fine-tuning the smallest components. When parts didn't exist, he invented them. When technology wasn't available, he created it from scratch. The first prototype began to take shape. A sleek, futuristic machine with sharp lines, a mid-engine layout, and a body that looked more spacecraft than car. It would be called the Koenigsegg CC, short for competition coupe. To Christian, it wasn't just a car. It was proof. Proof that even in the most unlikely place on Earth, innovation could thrive. The journey from dream to machine was just beginning. What started with sketches and sleepless nights would soon become one of the greatest success stories in automotive history. And as the world was about to discover, the name Koenigsegg would no longer be a whisper. It would be a roar. Chapter 1. In 1994, inside a dimly lit workshop in southern Sweden, Christian von Koenigsegg was standing before a bare aluminum frame, the skeleton of his dream. There was no guarantee it would ever become a car, let alone a supercar. But that didn't matter. Every empire begins with a foundation. For Christian, this was it. He called the prototype Koenigsegg CC, short for competition coupe. The name alone carried intent. This wasn't a project car or a hobby, it was a statement. But turning a dream into a car, especially one that could compete with the likes of Ferrari and McLaren, was a monumental challenge. Christian had no large engineering department, no design studio, and no supplier network. Everything had to be created from scratch. He started by focusing on what would make the CC unique. He wanted lightness, rigidity, and aerodynamic purity, a design that would blend Scandinavian simplicity with race-bred aggression. Every line, every curve of the CC was drawn by hand, guided by instinct and science in equal measure. The earliest sketches looked like something out of science fiction. A teardrop body, a wraparound windshield, and dihedral doors that opened like wings. The doors, later known as the Koenigsegg dihedral synchrohelix system, would become one of the brand's signatures. But in 1994, they were just a crazy idea on paper. To make it work, Christian and his small team used plywood mock-ups and metal hinges from hardware stores, adjusting angles over and over until the door's motion became both elegant and functional. They didn't have the luxury of computer simulation or 3D scanning. It was all trial, error, and imagination. One day, after countless failed attempts, the door finally opened exactly as Christian had envisioned. Smooth, balanced, and unlike anything seen before. He smiled quietly. It wasn't just a door, it was a symbol. Proof that even the wildest concepts could be engineered into reality. But as the design progressed, new problems emerged. Powertrain, suspension, aerodynamics. These were not minor challenges. These were the core of the car. Christian's small team didn't have access to advanced wind tunnels or factory-grade engines, so he improvised. For early prototypes, Christian sourced a V8 engine from Audi, a temporary power unit, chosen not for prestige but for reliability. He modified it extensively, tuning it for power and responsiveness. He knew it wasn't the final engine, but it was a start. The car had to move, to live, to breathe, even if it was imperfect. Each night, the team stayed late into the early hours, surrounded by the smell of resin and gasoline, building with their hands what others built with corporations. Money was scarce. Supplies were limited. At times, Christian had to sell personal belongings to fund new parts. Friends and early believers donated hours of unpaid labor simply because they believed in the mission. And through all of it, Christian's vision never wavered. He once said, "If you can dream something, you can make it real, as long as you're willing to go far enough." In those early years, far enough meant pushing every limit of sanity. They built molds by hand, shaped carbon panels in small ovens, and tested materials in freezing temperatures to simulate road conditions. The first time the CC's engine roared to life, it wasn't just mechanical sound, it was a heartbeat. The team gathered around, silent at first, as if witnessing the birth of something sacred. Christian didn't cheer. He just listened, absorbing every vibration, every tone. He was already thinking about how to make it better, but success didn't come smoothly. During the first few test drives, the prototype faced endless mechanical failures, fuel leaks, cooling issues, electrical shorts. The transmission, borrowed from a racing supplier, cracked under stress. Once during a high-speed test on a closed road, the brakes overheated and nearly failed completely. Christian didn't see these as setbacks. He saw them as feedback. Each problem revealed a path forward. He rebuilt, re-engineered, retested, and slowly the car evolved, shedding its imperfections, gaining strength and refinement. By 1996, after 2 relentless years of design and testing, Christian was finally ready to show the world what he had created. He presented the first Koenigsegg CC prototype to a small audience at the Cannes Film Festival, a bold move for a brand no one had heard of. Amidst luxury yachts and film stars, this silver, alien-looking car from Sweden stole the spotlight. The press didn't know what to make of it. The name Koenigsegg was impossible to pronounce, and yet everyone remembered it. The design was breathtaking, futuristic, yet purposeful. The car looked like nothing else on the planet. But the moment that changed everything came when Top Gear and Car magazine took notice. They wrote cautiously optimistic pieces about the mysterious Swedish supercar startup. They called it ambitious, unrealistic, and strangely convincing. For Christian, that was enough. He knew then that he was on the right track. Encouraged by the response, he pushed harder. He wanted to build a production version, something truly ready for the road. But that required money, resources, and a factory, things Koenigsegg simply didn't have. The next chapter of the journey would be about more than engineering. It would be about survival. Because for every great invention, there comes a moment when passion alone is no longer enough. The world had seen his dream. Now he had to make it real, in metal, carbon, and speed. And the road ahead would test him more than ever before. Chapter 2. By the late 1990s, Christian von Koenigsegg's dream had evolved from sketches and prototypes into a living, breathing ambition. The Koenigsegg CC prototype had made headlines, capturing the curiosity of journalists and car enthusiasts alike. But a prototype, no matter how striking, wasn't enough. To survive, Koenigsegg had to build a real car, one that could be sold, driven, and tested on the open road. The next step was the birth of the Koenigsegg CC8S, the company S' first production vehicle, and the car that would announce Sweden's entry into the world of hypercars. But the road to creating it was anything but smooth. After the CC prototype's unveiling, Koenigsegg still had no factory. The company operated out of borrowed workshops, relying on ingenuity and persistence rather than deep pockets. Christian knew he needed a proper home for his creation, a space where his vision could be transformed into metal, carbon, and performance. In 1997, a golden opportunity appeared. The Swedish Air Force had recently decommissioned a facility in Margretetorp and later another in Ängelholm, both equipped with large hangars once used for fighter jets. The idea of building supercars in a former airbase appealed deeply to Christian's imagination. These were spaces designed for speed, precision, and danger, the same DNA that ran through every Koenigsegg design. They set up shop in a small corner of that facility. Concrete floors, minimal equipment, and a handful of employees. But what that hangar lacked in resources, it made up for in purpose. The Koenigsegg dream now had a roof. Christian's philosophy for the CC8S was clear: simplicity, strength, and innovation. The 8S stood for Supercharged V8, a reference to the engine that would power the car, a 4.7-liter Ford modular V8, heavily modified and tuned in-house by Koenigsegg's engineers. What started as an American engine was transformed through Swedish craftsmanship into a masterpiece. With twin superchargers, it produced 655 horsepower, an astonishing figure for the early 2000s, enough to rival the mighty McLaren F1. But raw power wasn't enough. The CC8S had to be light, aerodynamic, and technically flawless. Koenigsegg pioneered the use of full carbon fiber monocoques and advanced composite structures long before they became industry standard. Every part of the car was built for function, from its sculpted body to its signature dihedral synchro-helix doors, which spun open like a mechanical ballet. The design wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. The teardrop-shaped cabin minimized drag. The underbody was flat for aerodynamic efficiency. Every vent, duct, and curve had a purpose. The goal wasn't to look fast, it was to be fast, without compromise. Still, building a car to that standard in such limited conditions was brutal. Every week, new problems emerged. Suppliers doubted Koenigsegg's ability to deliver. Some refused to work with them altogether. Others demanded massive prepayments that the small startup simply couldn't afford. There were moments when Christian had to pause production entirely, waiting for one small component or one delayed shipment to arrive. But quitting was never an option. Christian and his growing team worked through winters so cold that epoxy resins wouldn't cure properly. They hand-sanded carbon panels under floodlights. They tested engines in the dark Swedish night surrounded by snow, listening for the faintest imperfections. By 2002, after 8 years of relentless effort, the CC8S was finally ready. Sleek, low, and impossibly elegant, it was a car that looked like it had come from another world. Only 6 units would ever be built. Not because of exclusivity, but because Koenigsegg could only afford to produce that many. When the CC8S debuted at the Paris Motor Show in 2002, it was a revelation. The crowd gathered, drawn by its name, its design, its sheer audacity. Many had dismissed Koenigsegg as a curious Scandinavian experiment, but now the proof stood before them, tangible, polished, and extraordinary. Under its carbon fiber skin, the CC8S represented an engineering philosophy unlike any other. Christian believed that performance came not from brute force, but from balance. The car weighed just 1,175 kilograms, making it lighter than most supercars of its era. The power-to-weight ratio was unmatched, giving it the ability to accelerate from 0 to 100 km/h, 62 mph, in just 3.2 seconds and reach a top speed of over 390 km/h, 242 mph. The CC8S didn't just meet expectations, it shattered them. In 2003, the car was officially recognized by the Guinness World Records for having the most powerful production engine in the world. For a small company from Sweden, that title was more than an accolade. It was validation. The impossible dream had become real. But with success came pressure. The world's eyes were now on Koenigsegg, and the company was still running on razor-thin margins. Every sale mattered. Every mistake could be fatal. Building hypercars by hand was expensive, and one wrong move could erase years of work. Christian pushed forward with calculated determination. He used the CC8S not just as a product, but as a foundation, a proof of concept that could attract investors and customers who believed in the company's potential. And slowly, momentum began to build. Enthusiasts, collectors, and journalists began to speak of Koenigsegg with reverence. Here was a company that didn't rely on legacy or nostalgia. It relied on innovation, pure, fearless innovation. The CC8S also introduced features that would define Koenigsegg's engineering philosophy for decades to come. It had detachable roof panels that could be stored in the car itself, combining the thrill of a coupe with the freedom of a roadster. Its advanced traction control systems and carbon ceramic brakes set new standards for safety and performance. Even the interior, minimalist and purposeful, reflected Christian's belief that every gram and every element had to serve the driving experience. The CC8S wasn't built in large numbers. It didn't need to be. It was a declaration, a first masterpiece from a company that would one day redefine the word hypercar. But behind the public triumphs, new challenges were rising. Scaling production, maintaining quality, and ensuring financial stability would test the young company in ways Christian hadn't yet imagined. And just as Koenigsegg began to find its footing, disaster struck. In 2003, a devastating fire swept through the Margretetorp facility. In minutes, years of effort were reduced to ash, prototypes, molds, parts, and equipment gone. The dream that had taken nearly a decade to build was suddenly hanging by a thread. Most would have stopped there, but not Christian von Koenigsegg. He stood amid the ruins, breathing the smell of smoke and charred metal, and decided to rebuild again. Because for him, Koenigsegg wasn't a company. It was destiny. Chapter 3. The smell of burnt carbon and melted metal lingered long after the flames were gone. The 2003 fire was catastrophic, the kind of disaster that ends companies. For Koenigsegg, it destroyed nearly everything: molds, body panels, spare parts, and critical equipment. Years of effort turned to blackened rubble overnight. For Christian von Koenigsegg, standing before the ashes, there was no dramatic speech, no collapse into despair. Just silence. And then, quietly, resolve. He had come too far to stop now. Within days, he began searching for a way to rebuild. The dream wasn't dead, only delayed. But he knew that to recover, Koenigsegg needed more than a workshop. It needed a true factory, a foundation built not of hope, but of permanence. That chance arrived from an unlikely place: the Swedish Air Force. In 2003, the government was decommissioning one of its historic air bases, F-10 Ängelholm, located in southern Sweden. Its hangars were massive, designed to house supersonic fighter jets. The space was perfect: wide, tall, strong, and symbolic. The place where machines of war once slept would now give birth to machines of speed. Christian struck a deal and moved his company into the Ängelholm base, officially transforming it into Koenigsegg's new headquarters. The fit was poetic. Fighter planes and hypercars shared the same DNA: precision, lightness, and the pursuit of performance at all costs. Inside those hangars, a new chapter began. With the ashes of the old facility still fresh in his mind, Christian rebuilt from scratch, again. New molds were made, new machines were purchased, and a new car began to take shape. But now, there was something deeper driving him. The fire had stripped away the old dream and forged something harder, sharper, a belief that Koenigsegg could stand not just as a boutique automaker, but as a global symbol of innovation. The result of this rebirth was the Koenigsegg CC8S, unveiled in 2004. Built upon the foundation of the CC8S but vastly improved, the CC8S was faster, more powerful, and more aerodynamic. Beneath its sculpted carbon body sat an upgraded 4.7-liter supercharged V8, now producing an astonishing 806 horsepower, a number that shattered records and expectations. The design was a study in minimalism and aggression: wider front intakes for better cooling, a larger rear wing for stability, stronger brakes, improved suspension geometry. The car was lighter, meaner, and infinitely more confident. The world took notice. In 2005, the Koenigsegg CC8S claimed the title of world's fastest production car, achieving 388 km/h, 241 mph, at Italy's Nardo Ring, dethroning the mighty McLaren F1, which had held that crown for over a decade. For Christian, it wasn't about beating McLaren. It was about proving a principle, that even from a tiny workshop in Sweden, the impossible could be engineered into reality. The CC8S's success marked Koenigsegg's true entry into the global stage. Media outlets across the world began referring to the company as the Swedish Speed Factory. Orders began trickling in, and investors started paying attention. But Christian knew better than to rest. He understood that every headline fades, and only innovation lasts. Behind the scenes, he was already thinking about the next evolution, a car that would refine the CCRS raw aggression into something more mature, more complete. Meanwhile, Koenigsegg's operations in Ängelholm were expanding. What had once been a single hangar now buzzed with activity. Engineers, composite technicians, test drivers, and designers all working under one roof. The environment was unlike any other automakers. There were no layers of corporate hierarchy. Ideas flowed freely. Every employee, from interns to senior engineers, was encouraged to think beyond convention. Christian called it the flat pyramid. No bosses, just collaborators. Everyone was there for one purpose: to build the best car in the world. The company began developing its own software, control systems, and engine management tools entirely in-house, a rarity even among established automakers. Christian believed that outsourcing innovation meant compromising it. If Koenigsegg wanted to be different, it had to own every part of its technology. And then came the opportunity to show the world just how far they'd come. In 2006, Koenigsegg unveiled the CCX, the Competition Coupe X, where X stood for 10 years of relentless work since the first prototype. The CCX was designed specifically to meet U.S. safety and emissions regulations, marking Koenigsegg's official global debut. The engineering challenges were enormous. To sell cars in America, the CCX needed to comply with strict crash tests, airbag systems, and emission standards, none of which Koenigsegg had ever attempted before. But failure wasn't an option. The car was completely re-engineered from the ground up. It used a Koenigsegg-designed aluminum V8 engine, no longer based on Ford architecture but built in-house. But the true beauty of the CCX was in its balance. It wasn't just fast, it was intelligent. Every detail, from its active aerodynamics to its lightweight monocoque chassis, was designed to deliver performance that felt effortless, almost supernatural. The CCX's debut at the 2006 Geneva Motor Show was electric. Critics hailed it as the most advanced hypercar ever built by an independent manufacturer. The crowd didn't just see a car, they saw a symbol of perseverance, a phoenix risen from its own ashes. And with the CCX, Koenigsegg's new home in Ängelholm finally became what Christian had envisioned years earlier, a living laboratory for the future of performance. The base itself became part of the brand's mythology. Every car that left the hangar carried a small ghost emblem on its body, a tribute to the Swedish Air Force Ghost Squadron, which had once operated from the same site. The ghost became a symbol of Koenigsegg's spirit, unseen but ever-present, guiding every machine that bore its name. By now, Koenigsegg was no longer a secret whispered among enthusiasts. It was a headline, a bold challenger rewriting the rules of what a hypercar could be. But Christian knew the journey was far from over. The CCX had opened doors, but it also opened new challenges, faster rivals, stricter regulations, and an endless pursuit of perfection that would demand even more innovation. Still, he welcomed it all. Because for Koenigsegg, pressure wasn't the enemy, it was the catalyst. And so, from the ashes of disaster and the shadows of a forgotten airbase, Koenigsegg had emerged as a true force. The dream that began with a 5-year-old boy watching a stop-motion film was now a global reality, one built on resilience, obsession, and a refusal to ever give up. But as Christian would soon learn, success can be as dangerous as failure. The next years would bring new crises, and his most difficult test yet. Chapter 4. The year was 2007, and Koenigsegg had done what few thought possible. From a small airbase in southern Sweden, the company had built some of the fastest, most advanced cars on the planet. The CCX had proven that Koenigsegg could compete on a global scale, but success in the car world is a fragile thing. For every new headline, there was another challenge waiting in the shadows. Running a hypercar company wasn't glamorous, it was brutal. Costs were enormous. Research, testing, and production each demanded millions. Every bolt and sensor had to be hand-engineered. For larger companies like Ferrari or Bugatti, these costs were absorbed by decades of infrastructure. But for Koenigsegg, a company that barely made a dozen cars a year, every mistake could mean collapse. The hypercar market itself was changing. In 2005, Bugatti had released the Veyron, a technological titan with 1,001 horsepower and the backing of Volkswagen's near-limitless resources. Pagani was rising fast with the Zonda, a fusion of Italian art and engineering precision. Koenigsegg was now standing shoulder to shoulder with giants, but without their safety net. Christian von Koenigsegg, ever the visionary, refused to slow down. He pushed his small team to keep innovating, to develop technologies that even major automakers wouldn't dare attempt. Every Koenigsegg had to justify its existence, to prove that it offered something the world hadn't seen before. The pressure was relentless. Despite critical acclaim, Koenigsegg's production volume remained tiny, sometimes only 10 cars a year. Each car was meticulously hand-built, often customized to the buyer's exact specifications. It was artistry, not mass production, but art doesn't always pay the bills. In 2008, the world was hit by the global financial crisis, and luxury markets froze overnight. Orders were canceled, investors pulled back, and supercar companies everywhere struggled to survive. For Koenigsegg, still in its infancy compared to its rivals, the impact was immediate and severe. Cash flow dried up, expansion plans were halted. Every day became a battle just to keep the lights on. But even as the economic world crumbled, Christian refused to stop innovating. In the depths of financial strain, he began sketching a new car, one that would redefine Koenigsegg's future. Something more advanced, more aerodynamic, and more efficient. A car that could take on Bugatti not just in speed, but in engineering philosophy. It would eventually become the Agera. But before the Agera could exist, Koenigsegg had to survive. In a twist of fate, an opportunity appeared, the chance to buy Saab, another Swedish automaker that had fallen into crisis after General Motors' collapse. In 2009, Koenigsegg made headlines worldwide by entering negotiations to purchase Saab. For Christian, it wasn't about owning another company. It was about saving Swedish automotive heritage and expanding his own manufacturing capabilities. For months, the deal consumed his focus. Investors were rallied, partnerships formed, and media coverage exploded. Many hailed Christian as the man who could save Saab, the young dreamer who had once worked in garages, now poised to rescue a national icon. But in the end, the deal fell apart. Financing complications and government delays forced Koenigsegg to withdraw from the acquisition. The dream of a Swedish supergroup vanished overnight. For Christian, it was another devastating blow. The Saab saga drained resources, time, and morale. On top of the global recession, it nearly pushed Koenigsegg to the brink. Some insiders quietly wondered if the company could survive another year. But Christian had built his life on surviving the impossible. Instead of retreating, he doubled down. If Koenigsegg couldn't grow by acquisition, it would grow by invention. The company would focus on doing what it did best, building the most extraordinary cars on Earth. Out of that mindset came a series of small, crucial breakthroughs. Koenigsegg's engineers developed the triplex suspension system, a unique rear setup using a third horizontal damper to maintain stability and traction at extreme speeds. They refined their carbon monocoque, integrating even the fuel tanks into the chassis for weight savings. Christian's obsession with efficiency went beyond engines. He wanted to make every gram of material count. Each car became a case study in how to extract perfection from constraint. Slowly, the company stabilized. Loyal customers, fascinated by Christian's uncompromising vision, continued to order cars. Journalists praised Koenigsegg's courage to innovate while others played it safe, and through it all, the design for the Agera evolved. One sketch, one clay model, one sleepless night at a time. Then, in 2010, The new car was ready to emerge. The Koenigsegg Agera, meaning to act in Swedish, was more than just a model name. It was a declaration, a symbol of action after years of turmoil. But its creation came at the cost of unimaginable perseverance. For years, Christian had risked everything, personally and financially, to keep Koenigsegg alive. He mortgaged assets, reinvested profits, and lived without the safety net most CEOs would demand. He was all in, and in that gamble, he found victory. The Agera would not only restore Koenigsegg's reputation, it would elevate it to legendary status. It would become a car that defied engineering norms, shattering records and expectations alike. But before that triumph could come, Koenigsegg had to complete one final transformation, from survivor to innovator, from underdog to industry leader. Inside the quiet hangars of Ängelholm, the team worked in near silence, as if aware of the gravity of what they were creating. This was no longer a question of whether Koenigsegg could build fast cars. It was about how far the limits could be pushed. Every piece of technology in the Agera had to be an evolution. Every flaw in the CCX and CCR had to be eliminated. The next chapter wasn't about matching the giants. It was about surpassing them. And so, out of years of struggle, near bankruptcy, and relentless belief, the Koenigsegg Agera was born, the car that would redefine the company's destiny and set new benchmarks for the entire automotive world. The hardest years were over, but the greatest challenge and perfection itself was just beginning. Chapter 5. It began, as always, with an idea. Christian von Koenigsegg stood in his office at the old airbase, staring at a sketch pinned to the wall, a car that looked alive, muscular, fluid, dangerous. He called it Agera, the Swedish word for to act. And that's exactly what it was, an act of defiance. The world had written off small automakers after the financial collapse. Bugatti had Volkswagen, Pagani had Mercedes, but Koenigsegg? It had nothing but determination. The Agera wasn't meant to be another hypercar. It was meant to rewrite the book. The challenge was monumental. The CCX had been fast, brutally so, but the Agera had to be beyond fast. It had to handle, breathe, and respond like something from another world. Every screw, every wire, every molecule of carbon fiber would have to be reconsidered. Christian didn't want to chase horsepower. He wanted to chase purity. The first prototypes rolled out in 2010, and instantly, they looked unlike anything else. Sleeker, lower, and more sculpted, the Agera combined Koenigsegg's signature teardrop silhouette with advanced aerodynamic mastery. The car's carbon skin shimmered under light, woven, not painted, a visual declaration of engineering honesty. But beneath that artistry was violence. The Agera's beating heart was a 5.0-liter twin-turbo V8, developed entirely in-house. It produced 940 horsepower and yet weighed only 197 kilograms, lighter than most four-cylinder engines. Power wasn't the story. Efficiency was. Every component was designed to do more with less. Koenigsegg engineers obsessed over airflow, drag reduction, and structural rigidity. The monocoque was a single carbon fiber shell reinforced with aluminum honeycomb, strong enough to support the entire car even without its body panels. The result was a chassis so stiff, so light, that it transformed how hypercars were built. The transmission, too, was a marvel. A 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox, engineered internally, using a unique arrangement that allowed lightning-fast shifts with minimal loss of torque. Where other companies relied on outsourced parts, Koenigsegg built its own. Every challenge became a reason to innovate. But the Agera's most famous innovation wasn't mechanical, it was visual. The Koenigsegg dihedral synchrohelix doors, already iconic from earlier models, reached new levels of refinement. They opened upward and outward in a single motion, like wings unfolding. It wasn't just showmanship, it was practicality. In tight garages or pits, the doors occupied less space while mesmerizing anyone who watched them. When the Agera debuted at the 2010 Geneva Motor Show, the crowd fell silent. It was as if the future had quietly driven onto the stage. Journalists described it as a car built by aliens with a sense of Scandinavian restraint. But Christian wasn't done. He knew that every masterpiece could still be perfected. 2 years later came the Agera R, a version so extreme it seemed to taunt physics. Its twin turbos now pushed output past 1,140 horsepower when running on E85 biofuel. Top speed, theoretically over 440 km/h, and this wasn't theory for long. In 2011, Koenigsegg brought the Agera R to the Guinness World Records test track and set an astonishing series of records. 0 to 300 km/h in 14.53 seconds, 300 km/h back to 0 in 6.66 seconds, 0 in just over 21 seconds, a world record that stood for years. No hybrid assistance, no all-wheel drive, just pure mechanical genius. It wasn't just speed that impressed, it was how the car delivered it. Drivers described the Agera R as alive, communicating through every vibration and steering input. There was precision where chaos should have been. It felt more like an extension of human intent than a machine. The world finally realized Koenigsegg wasn't a boutique brand anymore. It was a hypercar powerhouse. Demand skyrocketed. Collectors and enthusiasts from every corner of the globe, from Silicon Valley to the Middle East, wanted to own a piece of this Swedish legend. But Christian wasn't chasing customers, he was chasing perfection. Each Agera was built to order, taking months of handcrafting. No two were ever identical. Every owner, every car, had a personal story woven into its carbon. And yet, behind the success, Christian remained the same dreamer who once watched that stop-motion film as a child. His obsession wasn't wealth or fame, it was innovation. He saw Koenigsegg not as a company, but as a laboratory for the future. The Agera became that laboratory's crown jewel. In 2014, Koenigsegg introduced the Agera 1, a car so ambitious it broke naming conventions. The title referred to its 1-to-1 power-to-weight ratio, 1,360 horsepower for 1,360 kilograms. No car in history had ever achieved that. The 1-1 wasn't just fast, it was terrifyingly fast. Built for both track and road, it introduced new levels of active aerodynamics, including movable wings and dynamic flaps that adjusted downforce in real time. The car could generate 610 kilograms of downforce at 260 km/h, essentially gluing itself to the tarmac. Koenigsegg had turned engineering into art, but even this masterpiece was born from struggle. The Type 1 program pushed the small company to its limits, financially, physically, emotionally. The margins were razor thin. Each car was a risk. But every test, every record attempt, pushed Koenigsegg further toward immortality. In 2015, the Agera RS took everything Koenigsegg had learned and distilled it into the purest form yet. A 5.0-liter twin-turbo V8 with 1,341 horsepower, active aerodynamics, and advanced traction management. The car's mission? To break the unbreakable. On November 4, 2017, on a closed stretch of Nevada highway, the Agera RS made history. Factory test driver Nicholas Lilja piloted the car through the desert at speeds that defied belief. The first run hit 272 mph. The Koenigsegg Agera RS became the fastest production car in the world, officially recognized by Guinness World Records. From a small Swedish airbase to the top of the automotive world, Christian von Koenigsegg had achieved the impossible. The boy with a dream had built a machine that outran giants, not with billions in funding, but with brilliance, obsession, and courage. And yet, even as the Agera RS claimed its throne, Christian was already looking ahead. Because for him, the Agera wasn't the end of the story. It was a beginning, a platform for something even more radical. Hybrid powertrains, free-valve engines, and the dawn of the next generation of hypercars. But that was a challenge for another chapter. For now, the Agera stood as the ultimate symbol of what Koenigsegg represented: purity, innovation, and defiance in the face of impossibility. A dream that started in a small boy's imagination, now a roaring reality breaking records across the earth. Chapter 6. By the late 2010s, the automotive world had changed. The age of hybridization was here. Electric motors were no longer science experiments. They were revolutionizing performance. From Porsche to Ferrari, even the greats had begun to merge horsepower with electrons. But at Koenigsegg, that idea wasn't a compromise. It was an opportunity. Christian von Koenigsegg had always seen technology as an art form, something to be mastered, not feared. So when the world shifted toward hybridization, he didn't follow the trend. He reinvented it. The result was something the world had never seen before. In 2015, Koenigsegg unveiled the Regera, Swedish for to reign, and that's exactly what it did. The Regera was unlike any hypercar before it. It combined a 100-horsepower twin-turbo V8 with 3 electric motors, delivering a total of 1,500 horsepower. Yet it wasn't about brute force. It was about elegance, simplicity, and control. Most hybrids used complex gearboxes to manage the blend of combustion and electric power. Koenigsegg threw that rulebook away. The Regera featured an invention that would shock the industry: the Koenigsegg Direct Drive KDD system. No gears, no transmission, just seamless instant torque. It worked like this. The electric motors provided instant acceleration from a standstill, while a fluid coupling directly connected the engine to the rear axle. The result was surreal: immediate response, no shifting, no lag. The Regera could surge from 0 to 400 km/h, 249 mph, in under 20 seconds, an achievement no other car had even attempted. But the technology wasn't what captivated the world. It was the vision behind it. The Regera wasn't a race car. It was a grand tourer, a new interpretation of what a hypercar could be. Its interior was luxurious, serene, hand-stitched leather, a touchscreen interface, electric memory seats, and even Apple CarPlay. Features unheard of in a 1,500 horsepower machine. Koenigsegg had built not just speed, but sophistication. And then, once again, Christian did something few CEOs would dare. He began to phase out his own creation before it even peaked. Because while the Regera was rewriting physics, he was already deep in development of something far more extreme: a car named Jesko. Unveiled in 2019, the Koenigsegg Jesko was a tribute, named after Christian's father, Jesko von Koenigsegg, the man who had supported his son's impossible dream since day one. But the car itself was anything but sentimental. It was, in every measurable way, a monster. Underneath its elegant skin lay the most powerful Koenigsegg engine ever created, a 5.0-liter twin-turbo V8 capable of producing 1,280 horsepower on standard fuel, and an astonishing 1,600 horsepower on E85 biofuel. The transmission, if it could be called that, was another breakthrough: the light-speed transmission, LST. A 9-speed gearbox with 7 multi-clutch packs, capable of shifting between any gear to any other instantly. No sequential order, no delay. It could jump from 7th to 2nd in milliseconds, a system so advanced that even Formula One engineers described it as alien technology. But numbers alone couldn't describe what the Jesko was built for. It came in 2 forms: the Jesko Attack, focused on maximum downforce and track precision, and the Jesko Absolut, designed to become the fastest car in the world. Christian called the Absolut the final frontier, the car that would end Koenigsegg's pursuit of top speed. With over 1,600 horsepower, an ultra-low drag coefficient of just 0.278, and active aerodynamic elements fine-tuned to perfection, the Jesko Absolut's theoretical top speed exceeded 330 mph, 531 km/h. Koenigsegg had entered the realm of science fiction, and yet it was all real. As the Jesko prepared for production, the company was already looking beyond traditional performance. The future wasn't just about combustion or electricity. It was about rethinking the concept of the car itself. In 2020, Koenigsegg unveiled the Regera, a car that seemed to defy logic. It was the world's first Mega GT, a four-seater family-capable hypercar producing over 1,500 horsepower. But even that number didn't tell the full story. The Regera was powered by 3 electric motors and a tiny 2.0-liter 3-cylinder engine, affectionately named the Tiny Friendly Giant. Despite its size, the engine alone produced 600 horsepower, thanks to Koenigsegg's latest creation, free-valve technology. Free-valve eliminated the traditional camshaft entirely. Instead of mechanical timing, each valve was controlled individually by pneumatic and electronic actuators. This meant infinite control, more power, less fuel, and lower emissions. In an era where the automotive world was splitting between nostalgia and electrification, Koenigsegg was building a bridge between them. The Regera could run silently as a full EV or roar like a beast on its 3-cylinder hybrid engine. It could seat 4 adults comfortably, carry luggage, and still outrun nearly every supercar on the planet. It was the ultimate paradox: family practicality fused with hypercar insanity. By now, Koenigsegg wasn't just a car company. It was an idea. The Ängelholm Air Base had evolved into a futuristic sanctuary of invention. Robots and engineers worked side by side. Every car was 3D scanned, laser measured, and assembled by hand. The walls were lined with the same ghost insignia, a reminder of the spirit that had guided Koenigsegg since the beginning. Christian had built something greater than he could have imagined. His company was now the standard by which innovation was measured. When major automakers wanted to test new ideas, they didn't look to Ferrari or Lamborghini, they looked to Koenigsegg. And yet Christian remained grounded. He still walked the factory floor every morning, still obsessed over details like door hinges and fuel sensors. The dream hadn't become routine. It was still alive, still hungry. As Koenigsegg entered the 2020s, the brand became a symbol not just of speed, but of human ingenuity. Each new model wasn't simply a car, it was a declaration that boundaries exist only to be broken. The Regera had redefined luxury. The Jesko had redefined performance. The Regera had redefined purpose. And through it all, Koenigsegg had redefined what it meant to dream without limits. The world's biggest companies operated with empires of people. Koenigsegg, with fewer than 500 employees, had accomplished what billion-dollar conglomerates could not. It made perfection tangible. From a burned-down workshop to an airbase filled with miracles, the story of Koenigsegg wasn't about cars. It was about belief. And as the engines roared across the Swedish horizon, one truth became clear. Koenigsegg had not just joined history. It had rewritten it. Chapter 7. By the dawn of the 2020s, Koenigsegg wasn't just a company anymore. It was a phenomenon. A living myth wrapped in carbon fiber. A symbol of what happens when obsession meets genius. And at the heart of that myth stood 3 machines. Each one a masterpiece, each one a reflection of Christian von Koenigsegg's restless imagination, the Jesko Absolut, the Regera, and the CC850. They weren't just cars. They were statements, each rewriting a chapter in the story of speed, power, and perfection. The Jesko Absolut was born from a promise. Christian had declared it himself. No Koenigsegg will ever be faster than this. This was the final word in top speed. The car to end the pursuit entirely. The Jesko Absolut looked unlike anything Koenigsegg had ever made. Its smooth, stretched body traded downforce for low drag. The towering rear wing of the track-oriented Jesko attack was gone, replaced by twin fins like a jet fighter's stabilizers. The car looked more like a missile than a road machine. Its drag coefficient, just 0.278, was the lowest ever achieved by Koenigsegg. Underneath, everything was calculated for aerodynamic perfection. Elongated tail, smooth underbody, precision-engineered airflow channels. And then there was the heart, the 5.0-liter twin-turbo V8 producing 1,600 horsepower on E85 biofuel. The power delivery was violent, yet eerily composed. The light-speed transmission with its instant multi-gear shifts turned mechanical brutality into ballet. Christian believed the Jesko Absolut could exceed 330 mph, 531 km/h, faster than any car ever built. Not a prototype, not a one-off. A production car made by hand in Sweden. To this day, the exact top speed remains theoretical, the perfect kind of myth. Because sometimes legend needs no proof. The Jesko Absolut wasn't built to chase numbers. It was built to end them, to remind the world that physics could still be bent by imagination. If the Jesko Absolut represented the limit, the Regera represented a new beginning. When Koenigsegg unveiled it in 2020, the world was stunned. 4 seats, cup holders, storage space, and yet 1,700 horsepower. It was an impossible fusion, part hypercar, part grand tourer, part science fiction. Under its sculpted carbon skin lay one of the most remarkable powertrains ever conceived. 3 electric motors combined with a 2.0-liter 3-cylinder engine, producing 600 horsepower on its own. They called it the Tiny Friendly Giant, or TFG, an engine that defied logic. It used free valve technology, which allowed each valve to open and close independently, eliminating the need for camshafts entirely. The result was flexibility and efficiency no other internal combustion engine could match. The Regera could run on gasoline, ethanol, or even carbon-neutral methanol. It could drive 50 kilometers on electric power alone or cross an entire continent with 4 passengers at hypercar speeds. It was proof that sustainability and performance weren't enemies. They were partners in evolution. Inside, the Regera felt like the cockpit of a spacecraft. 4 individual screens surrounded the driver. Every surface was wrapped in handcrafted leather and carbon. The doors, massive single-piece dihedral wings, opened to reveal the entire cabin in one graceful motion. In an era obsessed with electric futures, the Regera reminded the world that innovation didn't mean abandoning emotion, it meant enhancing it. It was the first time a Koenigsegg wasn't built just for speed. It was built for people, for families, for the dreamers who didn't want to leave their loved ones behind when chasing the horizon. It was perhaps Christian's most poetic creation, a symbol that even the wildest dream could evolve into something humane. And then, there was the CC8S, the car that brought everything full circle. Unveiled in 2022, it was more than just an anniversary model. It was a love letter to the past, a tribute to the car that started it all, the CC8S. To celebrate 20 years of Koenigsegg's first production car and Christian's 50th birthday, the CC8S combined nostalgia with cutting-edge innovation in a way no other automaker had dared. Its design was pure homage. The same elegant proportions, the same clean simplicity that defined the early 2000s. But beneath that familiar silhouette was 2020's technology, and a trick that stunned the world. Koenigsegg introduced a transmission so revolutionary that it bordered on magic, the Engage Shift System, ESS. It could function as a fully automatic 9-speed gearbox or transform, seamlessly, into a manual transmission with an actual clutch pedal and gated shifter. A dual personality, perfectly balanced. One moment it was an easy GT. The next, a raw analog beast. Power came from the same twin-turbo 5.0-liter V8 as the Jesko, producing 1,385 horsepower, matching the car's curb weight of 1 to 385 kilograms, another perfect 1-to-1 ratio. It wasn't built to set records. It was built to honor them. The CC8S was the embodiment of Koenigsegg's entire journey, from the humble garage in Ängelholm to global reverence. It blended the company's past, present, and future into one masterpiece of motion, and in doing so, it captured something that's rare in engineering: emotion. When the CC850 was unveiled, Christian's voice cracked as he described it. "This," he said, "is our story told in metal and carbon." In that moment, every failure, every sleepless night, every fire, and financial struggle had led to this. A car that proved dreams, when pursued without compromise, can become eternal. Today, Koenigsegg stands at the intersection of art and science. It has no massive factories, no multinational backing, just a team of visionaries in a repurposed airbase, creating miracles one car at a time. Every Koenigsegg carries a ghost emblem, a quiet nod to the fighter squadron that once flew from the same hangar. But the real ghost is the spirit of Christian von Koenigsegg himself, still haunting every sketch, every bolt, every roar. His cars are no longer just machines, they're messages, proof that perfection isn't built by corporations but by conviction. In a world obsessed with the next trend, Koenigsegg remains defiantly human, chasing not fame, but freedom. And as the engines fade into the distance and the hangar doors close, one thing becomes clear. Koenigsegg isn't merely building cars, it's building legends. Final thoughts. In every era, there are inventors who refuse to obey the limits of their time, men and women who look at what the world calls impossible and quietly whisper, "Watch me." Christian von Koenigsegg is one of them. What began as a dream inside the mind of a young boy in Sweden, a boy who sketched cars on the backs of school notebooks and dismantled toys just to understand how they worked, has evolved into one of the most advanced automotive laboratories on Earth. But Koenigsegg's story was never just about horsepower or speed, it was about faith, about a man who believed that a handful of engineers in a cold corner of Scandinavia could stand toe-to-toe with the giants of the world and win. Every bolt, every carbon weave, every meticulously crafted piece of machinery that bears the Koenigsegg name tells the same story. This is what happens when you refuse to give up. In an industry where compromise is the norm, Koenigsegg built its empire on defiance. While others chased mass production, Christian chased perfection. While others built empires of marketing, he built empires of innovation. He didn't start with billions in funding, celebrity endorsements, or global factories. He started with sketches, borrowed tools, and belief. And from that belief came machines that defied imagination. The CC8S, the CCR, the Agera, the Regera, the Jesko, the Gemera. Each one not merely an evolution of the last, but a revolution unto itself. Because to Christian, progress wasn't about adding more, it was about doing better, about finding beauty in simplicity, power in precision, meaning in motion. Koenigsegg has redefined what a hypercar can be, but beyond that, it has redefined what human determination can achieve. In a time when the automotive world grows increasingly digital, sanitized, and predictable, Koenigsegg remains a brand that still bleeds humanity. Every car is built by hand, every component has a story, every design carries the fingerprint of the people who made it. The brand doesn't just build vehicles. It builds experiences that connect man and machine in ways that feel almost spiritual. That connection is what sets Koenigsegg apart from every other manufacturer on the planet, because Christian never saw cars as products. He saw them as dreams made tangible, sculptures of speed, born from obsession. And that obsession has changed the very language of performance. When the world said a manual hypercar couldn't exist, Koenigsegg built the CC850. When the world said a V8 couldn't shift faster, Koenigsegg created the light-speed transmission. When the world said the internal combustion engine had no future, Koenigsegg invented the free valve and the tiny friendly giant. Each innovation was a rebellion, a quiet, brilliant middle finger to the idea that progress must always follow the same path. Koenigsegg's cars are more than numbers. more than top speeds or acceleration figures. They are works of art, forged in carbon and courage. Christian von Koenigsegg has proven that technology, when driven by imagination rather than ego, can still be beautiful. And that even in a world dominated by corporations and algorithms, there's still room for the individual, for the dreamer, for the craftsman, for the mad genius who refuses to settle. He once said, "If it can be dreamed, it can be built." That single sentence has become the DNA of Koenigsegg. Because behind every record, every innovation, every whisper of a Jesko at full throttle, lies the same principle. Nothing is impossible if you believe deeply enough in your vision. Koenigsegg's story is not just a Swedish story, it's a human one. A story about endurance, creativity, and relentless faith in one's purpose. It reminds us that true innovation doesn't come from playing it safe. It comes from stepping into the unknown and refusing to turn back. In the halls of automotive history, names like Ferrari, Porsche, and Bugatti will always stand tall. But Koenigsegg, the outsider, the rebel, the dreamer, will stand among them not because of legacy, but because of what it represents, the triumph of human will over limitation. Today, Christian von Koenigsegg still walks the floors of his factory in Ängelholm. He still talks to his engineers, refines designs, and searches for the next impossible thing. The fire that burned inside that young boy who once dreamed of building the fastest car in the world hasn't dimmed. It has only grown brighter. And maybe that's what makes his story so timeless. Because Koenigsegg isn't just the tale of a company that builds hypercars. It's a reminder to everyone watching, young, old, mechanic, or dreamer, that greatness doesn't require permission. It only requires belief. So the next time you see a Koenigsegg streaking down a runway, whispering through the wind, remember, you're not just witnessing speed. You're witnessing a dream made real, a dream that began in a child's mind and became a legacy that will outlive us all. Because in the end, Koenigsegg is not about cars. It's about what it means to be human.